Please, we will now invite the Reverend Ezra Clark to grace us with prayers.
May we bow our heads and go to the Lord in prayer. Heavenly Father, Almighty God, we thank you this morning for allowing us to come into your presence through the work of your Holy Son, the Lord Jesus Christ. Father, we thank you for this day, Lord, and we pray that you will continue to guide and direct the affairs of this legislative assembly, Lord. We know that all authority is appointed by you and you alone. Father, we thank you again for the Queen and the royal family and the governor, Lord. We continue to pray for them. Father, we ask that all the discussions of this day and the sessions to come will be done justly, will be done with love and mercy, and walking humbly with you. We ask, Lord, that we'll also be governed with a servant attitude. And Lord, we ask that you continue to direct in every aspect. May you join us in the Lord's Prayer. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and give us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, the power, and the glory, forever and ever. Amen. Amen. May the Lord's grace turn his face to shine on us, his countenance and his face. May he bless the proceedings. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen. Please be seated. Clap.
Cayman Islands Proclamation Number 2 of 2018. By His Excellency Franz Manderson, Member of the Most Excellent Order of the British Empire, Certificate of Honor and Justices of Peace, Acting Governor of the Cayman Islands. Whereas Section 83(1) of the Constitution of the Cayman Islands provides that the sessions of the Legislative Assembly of the Cayman Islands shall be held at such places and begin at such times as the Governor may from time to time by proclamation appoint. Now therefore I, Franz Manderson, MBE, Certificate of Honor, JP, Acting Governor of the Cayman Islands, by virtue of the powers conferred upon me by Section 83(1) of the Constitution of the Cayman Islands, hereby proclaim that a session of the Legislative Assembly of the Cayman Islands shall begin and be held at the Ashton Civic Center building on the island of Cayman Brac at 10 a.m. on Wednesday, the 5th day of September 2018, through Friday, the 7th day of September 2018, and shall thereafter continue at the Legislative Assembly building, Georgetown, Grand Cayman, at such date and time as the Legislative Assembly may adjourn thereto. Given under my hand and the public seal of the Cayman Islands at Georgetown and the island of Grand Cayman, this 8th day of August, in the year of our Lord 2018, in the 67th year of the reign of Her Majesty, Queen Elizabeth II. Administration of oaths, oath of allegiance, and due execution by Ms. Gloria McFeel-Nixon, the Acting Honorable Deputy Governor, responsible for the portfolio of the Civil Service, to be the temporary ex officio member of the Legislative Assembly.
All rise.
I, Gloria Michelle McFeel Nixon, do swear that I will be faithful and bear true allegiance to Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth II, her heirs and successors, according to law. So help me God. I, Gloria Michelle McFeel Nixon, do swear that I will well and truly serve Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth II, her heirs and successors, and the people of the Cayman Islands in the office of ex officio member of the Legislative Assembly, so help me God.
We welcome the acting Honorable Deputy Governor, responsible for the portfolio of the civil service, to be the temporary ex officio member of the Legislative Assembly. Please take your seat, ma'am. Please be seated.
Messages by the Honorable Speaker.
Honorable members, this occasion is an auspicious occasion. If you asked me if this were the state opening, I would have to tell you that it is the first sitting and commemoration of the 50th anniversary of Assembly meetings in Cayman Brac. Some 50 years ago, in 1968, on March 28th and 29th, our forerunners in this Honorable Assembly chose to have meetings of the Assembly on this island. Since that time, we have endeavored to hold meetings at least 1 or 2 times per year, per term. Honorable members, we are most pleased to have the House full today, and we are even more pleased that the school children in Cayman Brac are here with us today. We do also pay a special welcome to a longtime friend of our islands and our guests to these events. The Honorable Speaker of the Jamaican Parliament, the Honorable Dr. Pernell Charles Seedy, former Minister of Government, trade unionist, former Senator, and now the Honorable Speaker of the House of Representatives of Jamaica. He took time out of his busy schedule to attend this event. Jamaica, and Cayman Brac especially, holds long-held relationship that existed before and continues since 1959 on the breakup of the ill-fated Federation of the West Indies. Indeed, some of the former parliamentarians I will mention today and will honor later this evening attended school at Jamaica's prestigious institutions of the day of higher learning, such as Mico College, Jamaica College, Wolmer's, to name a few. The relationship still exists until today. The speaker is a parliamentarian of, I think, over 40 years service to his country. As I said, our relationship still remains good. So we welcome the Honorable Dr. Charles to Cayman Brac and hopes that his short visit here will be memorable. He will find the people of Cayman Brac are most kind and gracious to all our visitors. We welcome you, sir. Honorable colleagues, I know, and perhaps most of you know, that these meetings held here in the Brac have been appreciated by our people here, as they could see their elected members at work and feel the presence of all the elected and official members. In the 50-year period, these islands have seen growth that perhaps were not imagined. While I'm sure there are those who feel that more could be done, quality of life has improved. Just in my time as an elected official, I have seen improvements here in the infrastructure. And I mention that because when we look at our country existing in this region, which has many outer islands of some of the main and capital islands, such as the Bahamas, Grenada, Trinidad and Tobago, St. Vincent, and the Turks and Caicos Islands, it cannot be denied that Cayman Brac and Little Cayman have one of the best infrastructures. Honorable colleagues, that means representatives of these islands have worked, and worked in difficult circumstances, as over the years they have seen several damaging hurricanes that have affected Cayman Brac. When I came here as an Executive Council member for Health and Human Services in 1992, deceased persons were still being transported for funeral purposes in the back of a truck. We brought that process into a modern process, modern services. In this 50-year period, we have seen a public water system put in place, a road network second to none, an airport upgraded and renamed to the honor of one of our most deserving representatives, the late Captain Charles Kirkconnell. Air services improved. The rest home completed and staffed. Port facilities rebuilt, and social services extended to the elderly, seamen, and veterans, properly recognized with medical care and financial assistance. Our elderly and others in need assisted with financial aid and other social benefits. Education has improved with access now to tertiary level overseas and a university college in place here on this island. Sport facilities have been put in place for our young people, and this and more opportunities for our youth and improvement of quality of life generally for our people. Our representatives, your representatives in these islands, have worked diligently. I have been proud to work with elected officials that cared about the welfare of these islands. So as we celebrate this 50-year period, we give Almighty God thanks. To those stalwarts in the 60s, the 1960s, at least two of whom are still here, Captain Eldon Colonel, whose family is here today in the chamber, and Dr. Burns Ruddy, who himself is in this chamber today with his family. Their work, we can say, in their decision-making process, kept these islands out of federation, and a constitutional advancement in the 1960s we were not ready for psychologically nor financially, and they helped to set us on a development path from which we now enjoy a quality of life second to none in the region and high up on the world stage. This is an accolade, honorable colleagues, they are well deserving of, and one we as a country is indebted for. Those of the 1970s who have gone on to their eternal rest, Mr. Alfred Scott, Captain Keith Tibbetts, and Captain Charles, and Captain Mabry Colonel, and Mr. Trevor Foster, who is represented here by their family members today. The son of the late Captain Reed is also here today. In the 1970s, Captain Ashton Reed served a few years, but was most outspoken against the unnecessary intrusions of the then British administration of these islands. I don't think anyone of the day was as outspoken for the good of the Cayman Islands as a whole, and he also was instrumental in donating property for the development of the airport. Those from the 1970s going into a new era of the 1980s, the late Captain Charles Colonel, OBE, whose wife and daughter, as I said, I think is here with us. Certainly they will be represented at the reception this evening. He worked, assisted by Captain Mabry Colonel, to build a country. Proper docking facilities and a new airport were among the hallmarks of their tireless work as elected members. The late Captain Mabry Colonel, a former Speaker of the House, Mr. Gilbert McLean, a former Minister of Health and a former District Administrator, and Mr. Lyndon Martin, former MLA. And of course, the present representatives, the Honorable Moses Colonel, Deputy Premier and Minister with responsibility for tourism and district administration, and the Lady Minister, the only lady whom these islands chose to elect, former Speaker, former Premier, and now Minister of Education, the Honorable Juliana O'Connor Connolly, one of your representatives here. They have all worked, and this island has improved. Some people never see the difficulties that the Brac representatives face in having to be in Grand Cayman and be here in the Brac, but it is not easy. The one consolation, I guess, for the present members is that they need only to look back 50 years and see what those elected members must have encountered just to travel to and fro, and what they must have endured in trying to meet all the needs here in the Brac with limited, very limited resources. These two islands has done well. It is still up to the people to speed the development process if they wish to. We ask, do you want high-rise buildings and more traffic? Development means more people, but without development, there are no funds for a high standard of living to live on. We salute them all, And now I ask the Honorable House and all those present to rise in a minute of silence for those stalwarts gone on to their eternal rest. For God is our refuge and strength, and underneath are the everlasting arms. And we rise for a minute's silence in respect. Honorable members, please be seated. And honorable members, I thank you kindly for your indulgence this morning.
Motion for admission of His Excellency the Acting Governor to be moved by the Premier, Honorable Alden McLaughlin, MBE, JP, MLA, Minister of Human Resources, Immigration and Community Affairs.
The Honorable the Premier.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Good morning. Mr. Speaker, I beg to move that this Honorable House does invite His Excellency the Acting Governor, Mr. Franz I. Manderson, Certificate of Honor, MBE, JP, to attend the proceedings of the House in commemoration of the 50th anniversary of the Legislative Assembly meetings in Cayman Brac.
That this Honorable House does invite His Excellency the Acting Governor, Certificate of Honor, a member of the British Empire, JP, to attend the proceedings of the House in commemoration of the 50th anniversary of the Legislative Assembly meetings in Cayman Brac. All in favor?
Aye.
Please be seated. My microphone wants to be a contrarian this morning. Sometimes it's on, sometimes it's off. I know how it goes. We are very pleased to invite His Excellency the Acting Governor, the Honorable Franz Manderson, to bring greetings on the commemoration of the 50th anniversary of Assembly meetings here in Cayman Brac.
Honorable Premier, Honorable Premier, Honorable Speaker, Honorable Acting Deputy Governor, Honorable Leader of the Opposition, Honorable Members of the Legislative Assembly, Chief Officers, Heads of Departments, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, a special Caymanian welcome to the Speaker of the House of Representatives of Jamaica. Thank you for joining us. Good morning. It gives me great pleasure to be here, and I extend my sincere congratulations to the Legislative Assembly on the 50th anniversary of the first meeting to be held on Cayman Brac. The Legislative Assembly met for the first time on this island on the 28th and 29th of March, 1968. The meeting was held at the Secondary Modern School, Stake Bay Point. The order of business paper tells us that members had a very busy meeting, including questions to ministers and 11 bills relating to very familiar topics such as liquor licensing, dangerous drugs, and education. Tomorrow, we will celebrate another milestone, namely the 60th anniversary of the coat of arms, perhaps the most important visual symbol of our identity. Next year, Celebrate Cayman will observe 60 years of our Constitution. This year, we're also celebrating the 50th anniversary of Cayman Airways, whose predecessor was Cayman Brac Airways. Cayman Airways was established and started operations on August 7, 1968. It was formed following the Cayman Islands government purchase of 51% of Cayman Brac Airways, which was started in 1955 from LACSA, the Costa Rican fly carrier, and became wholly government-owned in December 1977. In some ways, it seems like the last decades have passed in the twinkling of an eye. From another perspective, the changes that we have witnessed in the Cayman Islands have been remarkable among our people, our country, and all branches of government. As an example, you know that Cabinet met here yesterday. Nearly half a century ago, in 1971, what was then Executive Council met on Cayman Brac for the very first time. In 1973, Mr. Trevor Foster was the first Bracer to join the Executive Council. To further demonstrate the remarkable success of Cayman Brac, preliminary work began on the road to the bluff in 1972. Yet today, the island boasts of an extensive road network, world-class sporting facilities, popular hotels, and condominiums. While our islands may be separated by water, we are one people. This has never been more evident than after Hurricane Ivan, when many residents of Grand Cayman, including my family, were offered shelter and access to schooling in Cayman Brac. Within a few short years, Grand Cayman was in a position to return this tremendous show of generosity and care in the wake of Hurricane Paloma. Our beloved Cayman Islands have become a world-class financial center and the jewel of the Caribbean. This would not have been achieved without the tremendous support of the people of the sister islands, many of whom have been leaders in the private sector. Today we have Mr. Ruddy, who is one of Cayman Brac's most successful entrepreneurs and investors here with us. And Mr. Ruddy, we want to say a special thank you to your family for all that you have done to make the Cayman Islands a very special place. We thank you. The sister islands have also produced leaders in government, including our first female premier, 2 speakers of this honorable house, and our current deputy premier. In our civil service, people of the sister islands have held numerous key positions, including Mr. Dennis Foster and Mr. James Ryan, who held the post of Chief Secretary, now called Deputy Governor. I'm proud to say that Mr. Ryan has been one of my role models over the many years, and without his support and guidance, I would not be in the position that I'm in today. District administration has played a key role in taking forward the vision of a world-class civil service by introducing credit and debit card machines to make it easier for customers to conduct business with government. The BRAC is a distinct and extremely important part of the Cayman Islands family. I know that the government remains committed to ensuring that Cayman Brac, Little Cayman, and their people are able to benefit from the growth of our economy. I also know that all members of this honorable house will ensure our continued success and a united way forward in the decades to come for all 3 of our beloved islands. In closing, I quote President Obama, who said, "Our most important task as a nation is to make sure that all our young people can achieve their dreams." Last evening, I had the great pleasure of attending the Speaker's Talent Show at the Seaman Center. I left there inspired and full of hope that the future of Cayman Brac is very bright. Our young people who performed was simply world-class. Mr. Speaker, thank you for your vision to include our young people in this historic occasion. Thank you to the Deputy Premier and the Minister of Education for the role they played in making the show a tremendous success. We are truly blessed by the Almighty God. I wish you a successful meeting. I thank you.
This Honorable Assembly will now resume its sitting, and we will move directly to the business on the order paper. We can do one or two things. We can continue our sitting, or we can take a break just to allow anyone that wants to leave. I suspect that children are here for a few minutes. I think, please be seated. We will move to the order paper.
Presentation of petitions.
There are none.
Presentation of paper and of reports. National Conservation Council Annual Report 2017, to be laid on the table by the Honourable Minister of Health, Environment, Culture and Housing.
The Honorable the Minister of Health, Environment, Culture and Housing.
Mr. Speaker, I rise to lay on the table of this Honourable House the annual report for the National Conservation Council for the 18-month period beginning on 1st of July 2016, ended on 31st of December 2017.
So ordered. Is the Honorable Minister speaking there too?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, the National Conservation Council held meetings quarterly as needed on the following dates: 24th of August 2016, 26th of October 2016, 30th of November 2016, 22nd of March 2017, 3rd of May 2017, and 14th of June 2017, and 18th of October 2017. All meetings were held in locations open to the public, normally the Government Administration Building in Georgetown, though one had to be held at the National Trust for the Cayman Islands meeting room at the Dart Park due to the unavailability of a suitably sized meeting room on the scheduled dates. Notices and agendas were published in accordance with the statutory requirements and the Council's policy and procedure. Manual and agendas and minutes are available on the Department of Environment website. Mr. Speaker, the National Conservation Law was brought into force in stages. The first commencement order made in Cabinet on the 9th of September 2014 caused Parts 1 and 2 in Schedule 2 to come into force on the 12th of September 2014. Parts 3, 4, and 6, Section 50, and Schedules 1, 3, and 4 came into force on the Earth Day on the 22nd of April 2015. Parts 5 and 7 of the law, with the exception of Sections 46 and 47 of Part 7, which deals with the Environmental Protection Fund, came into force on the 15th day of August 2016. This includes Section 51, which repealed the Marine Conservation Law 2013 revision. Now only Sections 46 and 47 of the law remains to come into force. On the 11th of August 2016, a number of regulations were published in the Gazette, which enhanced the operation of the law and prepared for the entry into force of Parts 5 and 7, so there would be no lapse of management when transitioning from the Marine Conservation Law to the National Conservation Law. These are the National Conservation Council License and Permit Directives 2016, which set out the issues to be considered by the Council or the Department of Environment acting on behalf of the Council when issuing a variety of license or permits under the law, as well as the conditions to be attached to these license or permit. The National Conservation Fee and Forms Regulation 2016, which set out the fees and the forms application when applying for a permit and licenses in the National Conservation Council License and Permit Directive 2016, and the National Conservation General Regulations 2016, which set out a variety of species conservation regulation previously covered under the Marine Conservation of Animals Law, as well as the repeal or the amendment of a variety of regulations under the Marine Conservation Law, allowing them to continue under the National Conservation Law. The National Conservation Council Guidance Note on the risk assessment of alien and genetically altered species, consultations for import and applications to release under Section 35 of the National Conservation Law 2017 was gazetted on the 7th of April 2017. This brought into force a systematic method of assessing the proposed importation and especially release or introduction of alien genetically altered species, allowing Section 35 of the law to be applied in a transparent manner. This is in keeping with the guideline of the Court and the Judicial Review, July 2016, of the Council's decision on the import and release of genetically modified mosquitoes as an experimental means of mosquito control by MRCU. At its general meeting of October 18, 2017, the Council delegated to the Director of the Department of Environment authority to receive, process, consult on, communicate regarding, and decide on applications for permit, licenses, or recommendations in accordance with any directives, guidance, note, orders, regulation, or resolution of the council in force at that time, reporting such activities at the council on a regular basis. Mr. Speaker, on the 10th of March 2016, the council submitted its proposed enhancements to the marine park system to Cabinet for consideration, and Cabinet is reviewing the proposal. With regard to the terrestrial protected areas, public nomination period for areas suitable for consideration as protected areas were held in 2016 and 2017. In 2016, approximately 50 nominations were received. The DOE designed a conservation scoring matrix to quantify the conservation potential of all sites, and the council considered all nominations using the scoring system to inform their deliberations. A number of sites were selected by the council for a full public consultation and negotiated with landowners. These were a mixture of crown lands and private property. Upon conclusion of the public consultation, and most importantly, the positive negotiation with landowners, protected areas recommendations were made to Cabinet. Any landowner who did not wish for their property to be nominated or considered did not go beyond the initial nomination stage. Any property where a fair purchase price could not be agreed in principle between the landowner and Lands and Survey, acting as the Crown's estate agent, did not proceed beyond the consultation stage. From these nominations, Cabinet designated 9 areas for protected area status. Mr. Speaker, in 2017, a further 17 nominations were received. 2017 nominations, along with submissions made in 2016, but not pursued for various reasons, were analyzed by the DOE using the same scoring matrix and given a new conservation score. The council will consider all nominations received and decide which one to pursue in 2018. The negotiations with landowners to take place in 2018 are complicated because the 2019 Cayman Islands budget, which passed in 2017, does not contain any environmental protection funds earmarked for protected areas acquisition, as occurred in the 2016-2017 budget. The total value of all the contracted purchases and associated minor costs in 2017 was $4,879,850, which was expensed against $6 million budgeted for the Environmental Protection Fund for this purpose. Mr. Speaker, areas protected in 2017 include land in the Barkers National Park, eastern interior of Little Cayman, the Cayman Brac Bluff, eastern end, Hemington Forest in Cayman Brac, Big Key, and various small mangrove keys in the North Sound of Grand Cayman, the Central Mangrove Wetland on Grand Cayman, the Lower Valley Forest in Grand Cayman, and land adjoining and expanding the Booby Pond Nature Reserve in Little Cayman. Mr. Speaker, overall, our purchases are concluded for all gazetted protected areas and included land protection by the National Trust. For the Cayman Islands, the amount of protected land on each of our islands is Grand Cayman, 12% protected, Little Cayman, 10% protected, and Cayman Brac, 6% protected. This will lead to the National Conservation Law protected areas, either alone or overlapping other protected measures, totaling 4,108 acres of land throughout the whole Cayman Islands. Mr. Speaker, Section 35 of the law deals with the importation, introduction, and release in any part of the island of live or viable specimens of alien or genetically altered species. This section has far-reaching implications for not only the conservation and protection of the natural environment, but also public health and sustainability, sustainable agricultural and horticultural practices. Mr. Speaker, the National Conservation Council guidance note on the risk assessment of alien and genetically altered species, consultation for import and applications to release under Section 35 of the National Conservation Law 2017 was published in the Gazette on the 7th of April 2017. This brought into force a systematic method of assessing the proposed importation and especially release or introduction of alien and genetically altered species, allowing Section 35 of the law to be applied in a transparent manner. This is in keeping with the guidance of the court in the Judicial Review 2016 of July, the National Conservation Council's decision on the import and release of genetically modified mosquitoes as an experimental means of mosquito control by MRCU. In the 18-month financial period for 2016-17, 680 and 68 environmental reviews were prepared by the Department of Environment under delegated authority from the Council for entities consulting the Council under Section 41 of those 668 environmental reviews prepared by the DOE, less than 1%, that is only 6 out of 668 applications, were determined by the Council to require an EIA. Of the 6 EIAs screened during this period, 5 were for government entities and only 1 for a private developer, which concerned extensive excavation works on the seabed for a large development along 7 Mile Beach within a marine protected area. Mr. Speaker, EIAs remain international best practice and an important tool for assuring the public that environmentally, socially, and economically appropriate decision-making is occurred. The activation of environmental impact assessments in local legislation has gone a long way to raising the profile of the Cayman Islands, which in February 2013 were assessed as weak in each of the 4 areas of environmental governance: species, sites, development, control, and people, evaluated by the Foundation for International Environmental Law and Development. Having EIA, Mr. Speaker, legislation also assists the Cayman Islands in achieving commitments made under the Convention on Biological Diversity, the Ramsar Convention, the Environmental Charter, and the Cayman Islands Constitution. Mr. Speaker, with regard to our energy policy, the Climate Change Committee provided the National Energy Policy Review Committee and the Cayman Renewable Energy Association representatives with extensive input on the new goals and policy gap analysis document as requested in July 2016. The latter included an analysis of the national emissions reduction target, setting per the stated NEP goals, and other considerations such as the Cayman Islands United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change, obligations including the Paris Agreement, Sustainable Development Goals, and global aspirations. The Climate Change Committee also undertook an initial review of the current draft National Climate Change Policy and relevant regional small islands, the UK climate change policy frameworks, including mitigation goals, targets, and baselines articulated in the policies of other small island developing states, which particular focus on achieving policy integration with the National Energy Policy 2017. The chair was also invited to attend a conference on diversification and resilience, a blue, digital, and green future for small islands and microstates in the British Virgin Islands between November 7th to 9th, 2016. A report of the meeting's outcome and its supporting material was shared with the NCC, the DOE, the Ministry of Environment, and the Cabinet Office, encouraging the Cayman Islands to engage in one or more of these emerging initiatives. Mr. Speaker, Mr. Speaker, continuation of invasive species control programs, such as the green iguana culling efforts on all 3 islands, depending on funding being available for the protection of the native species, the welfare of the cats, and the avoidance of potential human health and nuisance issues. Mr. Speaker, as a minister with responsibility for environment, I would like to take this opportunity to sincerely thank all the council members, present and former, for their hard work and unselfish dedication and service to the people of these islands through their hard work on the National Conservation Council. Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and God bless.
Cayman Islands Government Unaudited Quarterly Financial Report, 6 months period ending the 30th of June 2018, Core Government, to be laid on the table by the Honorable Minister of Finance and Economic Development.
The Honorable Minister of Finance.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Good morning, Mr. Speaker, and good morning, colleagues. Mr. Speaker, on behalf of the government, I beg to lay on the table of this honourable House the unaudited quarterly financial report for the core government of the Cayman Islands for the 6-month period ended June 30th, 2018.
So ordered. Is the Honorable Minister speaking there too?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I do. Mr. Speaker, on August 10, 2018, the Ministry of Finance and Economic Development arranged for the gazettal of the unaudited quarterly financial report for the core government of the Cayman Islands for the period, and honourable members of the Legislative Assembly were sent this report by email. Mr. Speaker, the information referred to in this report is based on the records from the General Ledger of the government's financial management system. It is also based on the representations and judgments provided by chief financial officers of ministries, portfolios, offices, statutory authorities, and government companies. I remind members that effective January 1, 2018, government transitioned to a 12-month financial year, which coincides with the calendar year 1st January to December 31st. Mr. Speaker, all of the amounts that I will provide from this point onwards are stated in Cayman Islands dollars. And the statement of financial position at the 30th of June 2018 at page 7 of the table document shows that the core government ended the period with $2.3 billion in total assets, $1 billion in total liabilities, resulting in $1.3 billion in net assets or net worth. Speaking to some of the specifics of the report, Mr. Speaker, cash and cash equivalents, which includes fixed deposits with maturities durations that do not exceed 90 days, were $28.4 million, and there were marketable securities comprised of fixed deposits with maturity durations that exceed 90 days. They totaled $547.7 million for a total of $576.1 million with respect to bank account balances. Due to the significant cash balances on hand, government now places funds on longer-term fixed deposits. These longer-term deposits are reflected as marketable securities and are not included in the definition of cash and cash equivalents, which only represent deposits that are of 90 days or less. To re-emphasize, Mr. Speaker, total cash balances of the core government at the 30th of June were $576.1 million. The public debt for the core government stood at $432.8 million at the end of June 30th, 2018. This was $35.4 million lower than the debt balance at the 30th of June, 2017. Therefore, government debt has been reduced by this $35.4 million over the one-year period, and it will continue to be reduced with the regularly scheduled principal repayments on existing government debt as and when those payments are called for. The statement of financial performance for the period, shown at page 9 of the table document, illustrates that core government earned total operating revenue of $498.5 million and incurred total operating expenditure of $307.8 million. The resulting operating surplus for the core government was $190.7 million, with SAGCs contributing an additional $10.4 million to the operating surplus as a result of their favorable performance. The entire public sector produced an operating surplus of $201.1 million. Mr. Speaker, revenue recorded for the first 6 months of 2018 was $38.4 million above budget expectations. This very positive variance was mainly concentrated in the category of coercive revenues, which are revenues received by government for which government does not provide any goods or services in return. This type of revenue includes levies on property, for example, stamp duties on land transfers, which was $15.1 million above budget expectations. Import duties, for example, the general category of other import duties, was $4.4 million, and alcoholic beverages duty, $1.9 million better than budgeted expectations. Other levies on international trade and transactions that comprise cruise ship departure taxes were $1.3 million greater than budget expectations for the period. And domestic levies on goods and services include the following examples of revenue items with the following positive variances through the second quarter of 2018. Banks and trust license fees were $4.1 million greater than budget. Mutual fund administrators were $3.1 million better than budgeted. Tourist accommodation charges were $4.5 million in excess of the period's expectations. And trade and business licenses were $1.4 million greater than the expected revenue for the people. These positive variances from the budget are partially offset by negative variances in other operating revenue items, such as other company fees
annual permanent residency work permit fees, and work permit fees in general. Mr. Speaker, in addition to higher revenues, expenses incurred for the period were lower than budget by $15.5 million. The areas that contributed to the largest under expenditures were the categories of personnel costs and supplies and consumables. Costs relating to personnel throughout the second quarter amounted to $140.3 million, reflecting an underspend in personnel costs of $10.2 million compared to a budget of $150.5 million. This favorable variance is a result of several ministries and portfolios still having vacant posts. Supplies and consumables were also lower than projected, producing an underspend of $11.4 million. Within the supplies and consumables classification, the most significant savings related to the category purchases of services, which account for 67% of the $11.4 million overall positive variance in the supplies and consumables classifications. Ministries and portfolios have indicated that expenditure with respect to the supplies and consumable category is anticipated to increase as the year progresses and will eventually realign closer to the budgeted projections for the full year. In other words, Mr. Speaker, the differences and underspends result from just timing differences. The statement of cash flows on page 12 of the table document shows that the net cash inflows from operating activities totaled $161.3 million. The net cash outflows used by investing and financing activities totaled $176 million and $18 million, respectively. Mr. Speaker, the overall fiscal performance reported for the period shows an operating surplus of $201.1 million, which is 50% above or $67 million higher than the budgeted expectations. This favorable position was due to the revenues and expenses performing better than our budget projections and the favorable contributions by the SAGCs. To repeat, government's cash position ended at $576.1 million for the period, or $110.5 million higher than anticipated. And I would remind this Honorable House that a significant portion of the excess cashes, of the cash that we are generating in this fiscal year, will be used to repay in the repayment of the bullet bond that matures in November 2019. Mr. Speaker, despite the overall favorable results for the period, revenues have tapered off in the second quarter of 2018 as expected, due to a significant portion of income being derived from the renewal of financial services related licenses at the beginning of the year. Additionally, the second quarter produced an increase in expenses, the largest being related to medical care at various overseas providers, which rose by some $6.5 million when compared to the first quarter. Expenses were also higher than the revenues for core government in the second quarter. By that I mean for the period from the 1st of April 2018 to the 30th of June 2018 by $6 million. SAGCs contributed $8.1 million for the second quarter, which mitigated the loss of core government in the second quarter and helped to produce an overall surplus of $2.1 million for the second quarter. When combined with the significant surplus for the first quarter, this results in the overall net surplus for the entire public sector of $201.1 million at the half-year point. Additionally, Mr. Speaker, the ability of ministries, portfolios, and SAGCs to remain on target is key to enabling the government to achieve the budgeted net surplus of $81 million at the end of the year. Now, the performance of the first half of the year has positioned this government and gives us some optimism about actually achieving and even surpassing our targeted performance. Increased construction and higher volumes of property sales will most likely provide the revenue streams to bolster government's position through the second half of 2018 to counter any costs that are likely to be higher than those that we have budgeted. Finally, Mr. Speaker, the unaudited quarterly financial report for the core government for the 6-month period ended 30th of June 2018 is available on the government and the Ministries of Finance and Development's websites, www.gov.ky and www.mof.gov.ky. And I thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Moody's Investment Service, Government of the Cayman Islands, AA3 Stable Annual Credit Analysis Report 2018, to be laid on the table by the Honourable Minister of Finance and Economic Development.
Honourable Minister of Finance.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, on behalf of the government, I beg to lay on the table of this honourable House the Moody's Investor Service Report on the Cayman Islands government, issued on the 23rd of April, 2018.
So ordered. Is the Honourable Minister speaking?
Yes, sir. Thank you. Mr. Speaker, Moody's Investor Services, in a report dated the 23rd of April 2018, reaffirmed the Cayman Islands AA3 government bond rating along with a stable outlook. This credit rating applies to all bonds issued by the government in both foreign and local currencies. The AA3, or AA3, as we more commonly call it, sovereign rating remains in the top tier of Moody's ratings matrix and is only 3 notches below the highest rating possible of AAA or AAA. Bonds that are rated AA are judged to be of high quality and are subject to very low credit risk. Now, in their report, Mr. Speaker, Moody's analysis of the government's credit profile reflects the evaluation of the economic, institutional, and fiscal performance of the Cayman Islands using a number of criteria. Our positive rating is a result of the following key drivers. 1, a very high gross domestic product, or GDP per capita. 2, a robust institutional framework. And 3, a comparatively low government debt burden. I will now briefly explain the significant indicators cited by Moody's that have resulted in the positive impact on our ratings. First off, on the economic strength. Mr. Speaker, Moody's determination of economic strength is reflected in the economy's wealth, its size, and structural factors that point to long-term economic robustness and shock absorption capacity. The Cayman Islands' economic strength was rated moderate by Moody's. The rating recognizes that our very high GDP per capita is within the top 15 of Moody's rating universe, which includes developed countries. However, this is balanced with our limitations as a small island economy that is highly dependent on financial and tourism-related services. Mr. Speaker, institutional strength reflects a country's governance model, the quality of its institutions, and the predictability of the policies. And Moody's ranks the Cayman Islands' institutional strength as very high minus on its global scale, which is only 2 notches below the highest possible rating. Based on the worldwide governance indicators compiled by the World Bank Group, Cayman is amongst the highest in the region for institutional strength and ranks in the top 20th percentile of all sovereigns rated by Moody's, including highly developed countries. Moody's credits our relationship with the United Kingdom for enhancing the stability of the government while also highlighting the strides that have been made in addressing the evolving regulation in the financial services industry. Moody's defines the fiscal strength of a country based on the overall health of its national government's finances, particularly with regards to its debt levels. The fiscal strength of the Cayman Islands was rated as very high, one notch below the highest possible rating. Mr. Speaker, the perceived fiscal strength of our government is underscored by our low debt servicing ratio, coupled with our commitment to further reduce public sector debt. The low affordable debt ratios are also supported by our long history of pegging our currency to the United States dollar, which significantly reduces the risk of exchange rate shocks. The score of very high for fiscal strength also reflects the government's comparatively high debt affordability and easy access to finance. Moody's expects the government's net debt to GDP ratio for 2018 to further decline, representing the 7th consecutive year of decline in this debt metric. Mr. Speaker, the report highlights that we maintained full compliance with the framework for fiscal responsibility in 2017 and that the 2018 and 2019 budgets were presented in compliance with the framework as well. It also notes our plan to use as much of our budgeted fiscal surplus for 2019 as possible with respect to the repayment of a government-issued bond that I mentioned previously that matures in November 2019. Mr. Speaker, the final factor in Moody's credit risk assessment is our susceptibility to event risk, which evaluates our vulnerability to any risk which may severely strain public finances. The Cayman Islands' susceptibility to event risk is rated as low minus. Despite our vulnerability to external shocks, given our small open economy, Moody's considered the inherent resilience of the local economy and the robustness of our institutions. Although hurricanes are a recurrent threat every year, given our geographic locations, Moody's notes that the relative wealth of the jurisdiction provides a strong buffer. Politically, there is very little risk of a destabilizing event, given the strong institutional framework and the administrative oversight by the United Kingdom. However, Moody's notes long-term economic risks related to loss of competitiveness in the Cayman Islands, two key industries, tourism and financial services, which could, in the long term, affect government's finances. Mr. Speaker, this latest evaluation from Moody's reflects confidence in our country's economic, fiscal, and institutional strength. And in my opinion, Mr. Speaker, it absolutely validates the policies of this government that we are pursuing with regard to our economic, fiscal, and institutional policies. However, Mr. Speaker, it also challenges us as responsible stakeholders to ensure that these accomplishments are maintained for the benefit of all Caymanians. Despite Cayman's high GDP per capita and fiscal strength, we cannot afford to become complacent. We must remain committed to ensuring that our debt burden remains very low, while constantly looking for opportunities and developments that can diversify and grow our economy for the benefit of all Caymanians. Mr. Speaker, I thank you.
The Cayman Islands Government Labor Force Survey Reports, Spring 2018. to be laid on the table by the Honorable Minister of Finance and Economic Development.
The Honorable Minister of Finance.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, on behalf of the government, I beg to lay on the table of this honorable House the Labor Force Survey Report, Spring 2018.
Is there a minister speaking there at all?
Yes, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I am pleased to present to this honorable House the highlights of the results of the Labor Force Survey conducted by the Economic and Statistics Office from 15th April to the 22nd of May, 2018. Mr. Speaker, the report provides an updated estimate of our island's population and a comprehensive presentation of their economic status as either employed or unemployed or not in the labor force, in accordance with their corresponding demographic and educational profile. The concepts and methodology used in the survey are derived from guidelines recommended by the International Labour Organization, and however, these are adapted to local conditions to capture the characteristics of the Caymanian labour force as distinct from permanent residents and other non-Caymanian labour force. At the 30th of June 2018, the population of the Cayman Islands was estimated at 64,420 persons, of which 36,154, or 56.1%, are Caymanians. 5,971, or 9.3%, are permanent residents, and 22,295, or 34.6%, are non-Caymanians. The estimated total population represents an increase of 2.1% compared to the estimated population as at the 30th of June 2017. The increase is traced largely to the 36.4% growth in permanent residents populations. The Caymanian population also increased by 1.8%, while the non-Caymanian population declined by 4%. Mr. Speaker, the total labor force reached 44,213 persons, of which 20,960, or 47.4%, are Caymanians. From the survey results, the number of permanent residents with rights to work was estimated at 4,409, or 10% of the labor force, while 18,844 Caymanians represented 42.6%. Compared to the first half of 2017, the labor force grew by 668 persons, or 1.5%, due largely to the increase in the permanent residents labor force by 1,067 persons, or 31.9%. The Caymanian labor force also grew by 2.4%, while non-Caymanian labor force fell by 4.5% compared to 2017. The labor force comprised 42,717 employed persons and 1,496 unemployed persons. Of the employed persons, 19,842 are Caymanians, or 46.5% of total employment. 4,283, or 10%, are permanent residents with the right to work, and 18,592, or 43.5%, are non-Caymanians. In comparison to the local employment as of the first half of 2017, the latest estimates show an increase of 953 persons, or 2.3%. This growth is traced to employment growth among permanent residents with the right to work and Caymanians, while non-Caymanian employment declined. Mr. Speaker, turning now to the unemployed labor force. Their total number declined by 284 persons, or 16%, compared to 2017 report. The resulting ratio of the unemployed to total labor force, that is, the overall unemployment rate, is 3.4%. This latest unemployment rate is the lowest for the Cayman Islands since the spring of 2007, since the spring of 2007, when it was 3%. It is also significantly lower compared to the 4.1% unemployment rate in the spring of 2017. Mr. Speaker, the number of unemployed persons fell across all groups, and over half of the total decline, or 56%, is traced to Caymanians finding employment. Unemployment among Caymanians fell by 159 persons, or 12.4%, compared to the spring of 2017. The corresponding Caymanian unemployment rate is 5.3%, the lowest, once again, since the spring of 2007, when it was estimated at 4.6%. This is also significantly below the 6.2% estimated in the spring of 2017. Mr. Speaker, members of this House will recall that in 2017 we had what we had called a false economy, wherein much of the development and expansion was taking place as a result of the construction after Hurricane Ivan in 2004. That all came to an end with the Great Recession in 2008. But these figures that show we have now had the best employment since that time period tells me very clearly this is real. It's not a false number. This is real figures. People are finding work. Unemployment among permanent residents with rights to work and non-Caymanians also fell compared to the spring 2017. In conclusion, Mr. Speaker, the results of the Labor Force Survey Report, Spring 2018, show the continued strength of the local economy, in particular, the private sector, which employs the majority of the labor force. I want, therefore, at this time, to take this opportunity to commend the local business community, including small businesses, who contribute approximately 25% to total employment. It is government's aim to continue efforts that will permit businesses to grow, which will also sustain an improving employment situation for our people. On behalf of the Ministry of Finance and Economic Development, I also extend our sincere appreciation for all the households across the 6 districts that participated in the labor force survey, which has helped our islands to have one of the highest response rates in the Caribbean. I commend this report to all honorable members as it contains a tremendous wealth of information with respect to the state of the island's labor market. I thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Office of the Auditor General, Cayman Islands Annual Report, 31st of December 2017, providing value to the people of the Cayman Islands. To be laid on the table by the Honourable Leader of the Opposition, the elected member for Northside, Chairman of the Standing Public Accounts Committee.
Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I beg today on the table of this Honourable House the annual report for 31st of December 2017 for the Office of the Auditor General, providing value to the people of the Cayman Islands.
So ordered. Is a member speaking there too?
Very briefly, Mr. Speaker, and thank you for the opportunity. I would just like to draw, in particular, Minister's focus to the format in the report, because this report incorporates the report with the audited financial statements, and that is the specific requirement of the Public Audit and Finance Law. And it would be nice, now that we have gotten most of the accounts of government up to date, for all of the ministries to follow that format in presenting their 2017 reports. I also would like to thank the Auditor General and her able and professional staff for all the hard work that they are doing to audit the accounts of government and to make sure that we're all sticking to good governance procedures. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Questions to honorable ministers and members of the cabinet?
Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker.
The member from Georgetown Central.
Mr. Speaker, I rise by a point of order.
What is the point of order, please?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'd like to take this opportunity to bring your attention to Standing Order 23-6 that states not more than 3 questions requiring an oral answer shall appear on the order paper in the name of the same member for the same day. And Mr. Speaker, I noticed that on the order paper today, there is no questions on the order paper. And I've submitted a number of them, and I don't know if there's an explanation as to why, particularly me as an independent member, don't have the opportunity to speak on behalf of my people, why the questions are not on the order paper. And those are the
Honorable
orders.
member, I have heard your query, and I think the answer would be that the questions are not ready.
Mr. Speaker.
Honorable member, Georgetown Central, Honorable Premier.
Mr. Speaker, there are 2 points. I assure the member his questions will get answered. The first is that we are well beyond question time. The second is that the questions have not been ready. The answers, I should, to the questions have not been ready, but I understand that most of the answers are now submitted, and over the course of tomorrow and Friday, we will endeavor to answer all the questions that have been submitted.
Honorable member from Georgetown Central.
Mr. Speaker, I do appreciate the Honorable Premier's response, but as a new member of this House, I'm trying to understand the protocols in respect to what has to be done the appropriate way. Now, Mr. Speaker, one of the first things the Honorable Opposition Leader did for me as a new member was say to read my standing orders. Now, the standing orders say it shall be on the order paper. The government just can't say, I'm not going to put it on there and answer you when you're ready. It says it shall be on there. Standing Orders 23-6. Doesn't say if they want to, it says shall. And there's a matter of process here, and it has to be respected.
They shall be. My interpretation of that is they shall be on the order paper when they are ready. The next item, please.
Statements by the honorable ministers and members of the cabinet.
The Premier.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I am very pleased this morning to address this Honorable House on this momentous occasion as we hold this state opening and the first meeting of the 2018-2019 session of the Legislative Assembly here on Cayman Brac in the Ashton Ruddy Civic Center. As we've heard earlier, this year marks the 50th anniversary of the first ever meeting of the Legislative Assembly on Cayman Brac, which was held 28th to 29th of March 1968. Mr. Speaker, I cannot do better than to repeat the words of the then President of the Legislative Assembly, the late John A. Cumber, when the Assembly opened all those years ago at the then Secondary Modern School here in Cayman Brac. Mr. Speaker, I quote what he said on that occasion. I know that all members of this honorable House will share the feeling with me that this is indeed a great privilege to be here, to indeed work in a new atmosphere, if only for a short time. And Mr. Speaker, permit me also to quote the words of the then Honorable Senior Member for West Bay, and at the time, Father of the House, the legendary T.W. Farrington. It is an inherent right of the people to be able to come and hear what is happening in our legislature. Mr. Speaker, that sentiment, the idea that the process of government needs to be accessible and open to the people, is one I wholeheartedly endorse. Very simply, that is why we are here, to share the legislative process with all the people of our beloved isles, to enable the people of the sister islands to readily attend a meeting of this legislature and to see and experience the work that we do. But equally important, Mr. Speaker, this occasion allows all members of the Legislative Assembly to have the opportunity to visit the sister islands and to see and experience firsthand the opportunities and challenges of their fellow Caymanians who live here. And I am pleased, Mr. Speaker, to acknowledge that all members of the House have attended on this occasion. My two colleagues from the sister islands, the Deputy Premier and the Minister for Education, Youth, Sports, Agriculture and Lands, consistently speak for the interest of the communities they serve during our caucus debates in this House and elsewhere across government. There is no substitute, though, for coming to see things firsthand. And I know that the elected members from Cayman Brac and Little Cayman are both proud to show off their community and introduce us to their constituents. Mr. Speaker, I have been coming to the Brac for 36 years, and I have noted the considerable growth and development, and indeed, Mr. Speaker, the challenges that are faced by these islands. There are some very serious and fundamental policy decisions that need to be taken about the future of Cayman Brac in particular. And I know, Mr. Speaker, that the two members who form part of my government are very conscious at how significant those decisions will be on the future growth or otherwise of Cayman Brac in particular. Mr. Speaker, it is also fitting that we take this opportunity to officially bring the celebration of the 60th anniversary of our coat of arms to the sister islands. In the words of Jamaica's first national hero, Marcus Garvey, a people without the knowledge of their past history, origin, and culture is like a tree without roots. So we will pause this week to remember and celebrate those involved in giving us the most important symbol of our shared national identity, our coat of arms. It is on the shoulders of these great individuals, and indeed on the shoulders of all who came after them, that we, as the current elected members, continue to build and to create a thriving future for our beautiful Cayman Islands. We also have our own heroes of today, Mr. Speaker. And as I have told this House before, this government is reviving and reforming the awarding of the Order of the Cayman Islands, which you introduced, Mr. Speaker, to outstanding individuals who have made a significant contribution to these islands and their people. The honors scheme will award 3 classes of distinction: companion, officer, and member of the Order of the Cayman Islands. It will also incorporate medals for valor or bravery. The bill to establish the honors scheme will be debated in this meeting of the House, and I will speak more to it then. It is planned, Mr. Speaker, that the first 3 honors under that scheme will be awarded during the next Heroes Day celebration in January next year. Mr. Speaker, during last year's budget session and state opening, I was pleased to report to this Legislative Assembly this government's objectives for its 4-year term, set out in a plan entitled Stability, Empathy, and Prosperity, a plan for sustainable social and economic development. Today, Mr. Speaker, I will update the House and the country on the progress we have made in implementing our plan, advising the House and the country on the current state of the nation. Mr. Speaker, over the past 5 years as Premier, I have laid out a consistent vision for the future of our islands, which the 2 successive governments I have been privileged to lead have worked and are working tirelessly to deliver. I am delighted at the progress we continue to make towards achieving our ambitions for our country, and I will say more about that progress shortly. I don't underestimate the work that still needs to be done, Mr. Speaker, and I recognize the challenges that we face. However, you can rest assured that this government will continue to build on what we have achieved. We will maintain our focus on the priorities we have set, and we will ensure a strong and successful Cayman Islands for all our people. The cornerstone of our ambition, and indeed our success, is building a strong and resilient economy to help families and businesses thrive. Throughout my political career, Mr. Speaker, I have consistently argued that without steady and sustainable growth, neither government nor the country is able to achieve anything. You see, Mr. Speaker, and I know you understand this, it takes economic growth to create jobs and opportunities that benefit our people. It also takes economic growth to provide the funds necessary to build schools, to pay teachers and police officers, to pay for health services, to build necessary infrastructure like roads and airports, and much more. I believe, Mr. Speaker, that the day we stop growing is the day we start dying. And Mr. Speaker, because this government understands the importance of sustainable economic growth, we have been pursuing a strategy for growth that is not simply about this 4-year term, but about creating the favorable conditions that will drive our economy for many years to come. And we are seeing the success of this strategy as our economy continues its trajectory of growth, begun in the last administration, across all the key sectors, including tourism. All areas of tourism are seeing growth, including sports tourism. I was delighted by the success of the recent Pan Am Squash Championships in Grand Cayman, and I'm looking forward to extending a warm Caymankind welcome next year to the Carifta Games. I thank all involved in making these events a success, but particularly the Sports and Transport Councillor and MLA for Georgetown West for his tireless work to develop sports and young people across these islands. As Caymanians, we have long understood, Mr. Speaker, the value that tourism creates in our economy. And I am sure, sir, that you are as pleased as I am to see tourism records continue to tumble as we welcome ever-increasing numbers of visitor arrivals. Indeed, in the first 6 months of 2018 alone, we have seen a 20% increase over the same period last year. And, Mr. Speaker, in the crucial stayover market, the Cayman Islands saw increased arrivals in the first half of this year that exceeded more than 250,000 visitors, a 16% increase on last year. Similarly, cruise arrivals in that 6-month period were above the 1 million mark. Maintaining that performance through the second half of this year will mean another record year for cruise arrivals. There are many regional options available to tourists, and if they have chosen the Cayman Islands over the Bahamas or Cuba or Mexico, then that is because of the quality product that we have here, combined with the outstanding promotional work of the Ministry and the Department of Tourism and its private sector partners. So, Mr. Speaker, we can be confident that these sustained tourism improvement numbers are clearly not some mere blip, but the consequence of sound planning and strong delivery. Here I must pause to pay tribute to the Honorable Deputy Premier and Minister for Tourism and his ministry team, who are the architects of those plans, along with the Department of Tourism. And I pay tribute to all those who invest in or work in the hospitality sector for helping create our high-quality Caymanian tourism brand. As I have stated, though, Mr. Speaker, the plans go well beyond this immediate success, impressive though it is. The Honorable Deputy Premier is continuing to develop and to implement a new 5-year national tourism plan that will drive the next phase of the industry's development, including enhancing the tourism product here in Cayman Brac. The beginning of the new year will see the completion of the improvements that will almost triple the capacity at Owen Roberts International Airport and provide us with a much-needed modern airport. Many previous administrations have talked about the need for a new airport, but it will be my last administration and this one that have gotten it done and paid for it with cash and not with new taxes or new debt, a tremendous achievement by any standard. And when done, the fully renovated Owen Roberts International Airport, as well as the recently upgraded Charles Colonel International Airport, will mark a step change for air transport in these islands. Mr. Speaker, while we welcome our visitors to our islands, we're also making it easier for our own people to travel and return home. The introduction of the Customs Green Channel at airport arrival is allowing those returning home who do not have purchases above the dutiable limit to clear customs much quicker. Those with items to declare will join the regular customs line to declare their imported items and then pay duty as necessary. Of course, Mr. Speaker, Customs reserves the right to stop and search anyone passing through the Green Channel should they suspect that they are evading duty. Our officers are being trained and will continue to be trained to monitor and watch for suspicious activity. Continued vigilance will always be important, but increasingly our border security depends on our ability to act based on specific intelligence received rather than suspicion. This is why we recently passed legislation to allow the Cayman Islands to participate in the Advanced Passenger Information Program, receiving early warning of individuals of concern that are on their way to our airports and seaports. This is the direction that we are working towards, Mr. Speaker. Intelligence-based vetting that has the best chance of stopping those bringing in contraband or trying to circumvent the customs law. I will speak more about border security later, Mr. Speaker, but certainly this approach is a central part of the solution to better securing our borders. And, Mr. Speaker, because of this new approach at our airports, my government has carefully considered how best we can encourage all residents to declare amounts above the allowed duty-free limits. Certainly raising the personal duty-free limit is one such solution. Increasing the fines on those who evade duty is an alternative. Our preference, Mr. Speaker, is to offer a carrot rather than to rely on the stick approach. And so, Mr. Speaker, I am happy to advise that government has decided to increase the personal import duty allowance from $350 per person to $500 per person with effect from the 1st of November this year. As is Mr. Speaker, I thank the Leader of the Opposition for his enthusiastic applause. Mr. Speaker, as is always the case, this will apply to purchases imported for personal use and not for commercial purposes. I believe the vast majority of Caymanians and residents will welcome this increase in the duty allowance and will abide by the rules requiring them to declare any goods imported over that limit. However, if there is abuse of the system, and if it is determined that an increase in fines is also needed to combat abuse, then, Mr. Speaker, we will certainly take that into consideration. We have, of course, fully analyzed the potential impact of this raising of the duty threshold on government revenues. In doing so, the Minister of Finance has carefully examined the actual declarations made by arriving passengers over time and have concluded that the potential lost revenue to government is in the range of about $1 million per year. Mr. Speaker, our careful stewardship of the national finances makes this an affordable amount for government to forego, while being another welcome reduction in the burden of duties on Caymanians and residents. In addition to encouraging proper declarations at the airport, this increase will also provide our people with some useful monetary relief when returning home from their annual vacation and shopping trips. Taken together, our new processes are designed to significantly improve security while making arriving and passing through customs and border security at the airport much easier and faster. Mr. Speaker, our investment in our main airports, combined with our proven ability to bring more visitors to our islands, has created the conditions for the private sector to invest in increased hotel capacity. The DART Group, Howard Hospitality Group, as well as the NCB Group, all have plans to build new hotels. And we are seeing these investments not only around 7 Mile Beach, but also in Bordentown, with the announcement of the prestigious new Mandarin Oriental Hotel there. This and other new hotels will create jobs in their own right, while the visitors they attract will bring more employment and entrepreneurial opportunities for Caymanians in the tourism industry. This government, Mr. Speaker, has also signaled its willingness to take the hard but necessary decisions to secure the future of our cruise tourism sector through the development of 2 cruise piers and associated enhanced cargo facilities in Georgetown. Both aspects of this project are necessary for the same reasons: to help protect our future economy and the well-being of Caymanian families. By allowing larger cruise ships the ability to dock, we are ensuring that we maintain this critical industry into the future. Of this, Mr. Speaker, I am sure. But, Mr. Speaker, this is about more than cruise ship piers. This is also about enlarging the crucial cargo dock in Georgetown. By ensuring that the country's main cargo dock can also accommodate larger cargo ships, we will help reduce shipping costs and, in so doing, help lower the cost of goods shipped to Grand Cayman. This provides us with a valuable opportunity to reduce the cost of products coming into our islands and lower the cost of living for Caymanians and residents. By accepting larger cargo ships, we can also attract those that now bypass us, taking produce and seafood from South and Central America to Miami, only to offload and transfer these foodstuffs into smaller vessels that come to Grand Cayman, again adding another level of shipping and other costs to products imported into our islands. Mr. Speaker, we have to get off the small ship merry-go-round if we are to have a chance at reducing the cost of living in these islands. Mr. Speaker, we are fully cognizant and we have been clear that the redevelopment of our port must minimize environmental impacts. As in all things, there is a trade-off, and none of us would seek to contend otherwise. But assessing the potential environmental impact of the development of the cruise berthings is not simply a case of weighing the potential environmental damage that will be caused by the port development against a scenario of no damage if the status quo is allowed to remain. Mr. Speaker, that is not the case at all. To believe that is to ignore the decades of massive anchor damage sustained by the reefs in Georgetown Harbor, often caused by cruise ships. And as long as cruise ships are allowed to anchor in the harbor, the risk of more environmental damage will continue. That consideration, Mr. Speaker, must be part of the overall assessment of the costs and benefits of the new port. We have also been clear, Mr. Speaker, and we are determined that the financing must not place disproportionate risks on government finances. In June this year, the Deputy Premier confirmed that the negotiations with the cruise companies regarding those issues, among others, remain on track. Because of the commercially sensitive nature of the discussions, we cannot provide the kind of running commentary on progress that some have called for. But as the Deputy Premier has repeatedly promised, as soon as we are able to communicate those details, we will do so. That said, Mr. Speaker, the Minister, that is the Deputy Premier, and the government have been transparent and forthcoming on this project from the beginning and have kept the public as up to date as possible on where we are. All reports have been made public, and there have been public meetings held at various points over the life of the project. The vast majority of the members of this government campaigned on building a cruise and enhanced cargo port, as did the majority of the members in the last administration. Indeed, Mr. Speaker, in every election over the last 12 or more years, the governments that were formed following them had a viable cruise dock as part of their election platforms. In last year's election campaign, both political parties, yours, sir, and mine, and many independents, campaigned on building viable cruise piers. So I am satisfied that the electorate has had ample opportunity over successive elections, including most recently at the polls last year, to have their say on the question of having enhanced port facilities, cruise, and cargo. For our part, the government believes that it is in the vital national interest of the Cayman Islands to proceed with the port project, provided we do everything reasonably that we can to limit the environmental impact and to build it as affordable as we can, and with the cruise companies having skin in the game. And, Mr. Speaker, this we will do. We are matching this approach to securing tourism growth with our support for the financial services industry, Cayman's other traditional economic pillar. Our role here is different, but no less important. Here, I must thank the Minister for Financial Services and Home Affairs and the staff in her ministry who are working with Cayman Finance and the industry sector to ensure that the legislative and regulatory frameworks we put in place support the industry and enable it to compete in global markets. The government recognizes the risks to the future success of our financial services industry. Mr. Speaker, it is a huge frustration to me that threats are not just coming from the usual suspects, but from those we should be able to count on, not just as our friends, but as our advocates. Thanks to a handful of misinformed malcontents in the United Kingdom Conservative Party in Parliament, we are threatened with the imposition of public registers of beneficial ownership, a standard to which few, if any, competitor jurisdictions even aspire. Let me say now, as I have said before, We will face down that threat if and when it materializes. We will work with our partners in the industry, and we will deal with it appropriately, if necessary, challenging it in the courts. But, Mr. Speaker, what this sorry episode highlights is that we cannot rely on the United Kingdom to defend, let alone promote, Cayman's economic interests. This is particularly so at this juncture when they have their own pre- and post-Brexit worries. Mr. Speaker, it is time for Cayman to step out of the UK's shadow and stand up for itself. For that reason, I am today announcing the establishment of a new Ministry of International Trade and Investment. The ministry's role will be to enhance the reputation of the Cayman Islands, to advance the economic and political interests of the government, the people and the business community, and to make our economy easier to do business with, including acting as a single doorway for potential foreign direct investment. The ministry will assume responsibility for the Cayman Islands Government Office in London and other overseas offices, such as the proposed Cayman Islands Government Office in Hong Kong, which I have previously announced. As Premier, I will assume responsibility for this ministry, which is planned to become operational early in the new year. The creation of the new ministry is the right response to the changed circumstances we find ourselves in, but we must also fight to safeguard ourselves against any further inappropriate interference in what is our own business. Make no mistake, Mr. Speaker, the UK Parliament's decision to seek to require public registers represents a constitutional overreach into matters that should only concern locally elected representatives. I am continuing to press the case for constitutional reform with the Prime Minister's office and with Lord Ahmad, the Minister for the Overseas Territories, in order to clearly delineate local matters from the very few areas where the UK needs to retain competence to act directly. Despite the tangled web that is Brexit, the UK has responded positively to the issues I have raised and agreed to work with us on discussing constitutional reform. Constitutional reform, Mr. Speaker, may seem a dry subject to some, but it matters. It really matters. It matters to our economy, and it matters to our people. We Caymanians must be able to chart our own future and to take responsibility for our own affairs, free from arbitrary or perhaps even malicious interference. I will pause here, Mr. Speaker, to thank the Honourable Leader of the Opposition for continuing to work with me to get this matter resolved. I will continue to press the case for change as vigorously as possible. While tourism, Mr. Speaker, and financial services remain our pillar industries, and we will work hard to enhance and protect these industries, our vision for the Cayman economy must be one of increasing diversification. My own view, repeated to this House many times, is that we must extend our competitive advantage from financial services into other areas of knowledge-based industries and grasp the opportunities of the digital economy. In that context, I would highlight two initiatives that will, I believe, be seen to be crucial to the long-term prospects of our economy. The ongoing development of Cayman Tech City, part of our Cayman Enterprise City Special Economic Zone, is providing a base for the growth of well over 250 companies, from global market leaders to innovative startups with a focus in the tech space. This includes the exciting developments in fintech and blockchain technology. CEC, Cayman Enterprise City, with the varied businesses it attracts, including tech businesses, is proving a valuable addition to our business offerings. In addition, Mr. Speaker, the announcement last month of the launch of Tech Cayman, which has connections to the developers of Health City Cayman Islands, will see complementary opportunities in the digital space for software companies and others to create intellectual property and other assets. In welcoming this development, I will simply restate the point made by the founders of Tech Cayman themselves, that this has only been made possible because of my last administration's willingness to create, almost from scratch, a world-class framework of legislation to protect intellectual property. I would, Mr. Speaker, add that the implementation of modern intellectual property laws will help drive business in other ways. As an example, as the media recently reported, over the past year, the number of applications to register trademarks in the Cayman Islands has jumped from the typical 300 or so applications per year to 620 last year. And we expect the number of applications to continue to increase. Ours then, Mr. Speaker, as I have said before, is a vision for strong economic growth. However, that does not mean growth at any cost. And in two crucial senses, our ambition comes with an important qualification. First, our vision for growth is actually a vision of prosperity for Caymanians. Secondly, growth must be at a level we can sustainably accommodate without irreparably compromising the environment and the way of life that makes our islands special. Our vision for prosperity means that all Caymanians must be able to benefit from our economic strength. The ambitions of Caymanians for themselves and their children must be capable of being achieved when matched with the hard work and determination to succeed that has long been the hallmark of the people of these islands. I have previously described this, Mr. Speaker, as the Cayman Economic Contract. We welcome the foreign investment, the expatriate wealth creators, and the immigrant labor that have for decades, alongside hardworking and entrepreneurial Caymanians, been the bedrock of the Cayman economic miracle. But that miracle has also been about the creation of real and meaningful opportunities for all Caymanians to participate and to benefit from growth. Ours is a vision of economic and social inclusion, not one of growth that simply benefits a wealthy few. The most obvious expression of that inclusion is through direct participation in the economy, through either entrepreneurial or employment opportunities. This government has demonstrated its willingness to help ensure that both of those opportunities are there for Caymanians to take. Mr. Speaker, there is a widespread perception that this jurisdiction is comprised of multinational financial and legal firms. It is certainly the case that we are blessed with many such businesses here. But it is also the case that the Cayman Islands, all of our islands, including Cayman Brac and Little Cayman, is home to a thriving small business economy. This government has supported and will further support those who wish to start and grow their own business. I commend the work the Minister for Commerce, Planning and Infrastructure has been doing to cut red tape, to streamline licensing and other processes, and to minimize the cost of doing business in our economy. I am excited by his plans for the creation of a small business center that will offer the kind of structured support that particularly micro businesses need in their early stages. My last administration succeeded in increasing the number of new businesses formed, and this administration is building on that as we look to ensure that small businesses are more fully enabled, encouraged, and supported by government. For the majority of Caymanians, though, Mr. Speaker, it is access to employment opportunities that will remain the priority. For that reason, one of the key commitments made by this government was a pledge to achieve full Caymanian employment. Mr. Speaker, we will deliver on that commitment. The strong performance of our economy, thanks to the policies of the last administration and this one, has seen a consequent downward trend in Caymanian unemployment since it reached a peak of 10.5% in 2012. The most recent spring 2018 labor force survey is proof of this, with Caymanian unemployment having effectively been halved since that peak and now standing at 5.3%. This improvement is against the backdrop of a Caymanian labor force with almost 19,900 Caymanians employed. Overall, that means that thanks to the policies implemented by this administration and the last, some 3,350 more Caymanians are now working and able to support themselves and their families than was the case before we took office in 2013. And looking across all sectors of the labor force, Mr. Speaker, I can report that total unemployment is now at 3.4% versus 4.1% at the same time last year. All positive signs of a growing economy providing job opportunities for Caymanians. However, Mr. Speaker, as good as some may find these numbers, this government understands that we must do more if we are to deliver on our commitment to full Caymanian employment, where any Caymanian able and willing to work is able to find employment. This government appreciates that it is the private sector that creates the necessary jobs, and it is the private sector that must give Caymanians the opportunities to take those jobs. We also appreciate that government must do more to support Caymanians into the labor market, ready to grasp the opportunities that are there. And we must do more to work with the private sector in ways that facilitate the smooth working of the labor market for the benefit of everyone. The experience of the last administration was that the machinery of government was not always up to the task, hindered by bureaucracy and the inefficiency and misalignment of differing ministerial responsibilities. That is why this government made the creation of the new Workforce Opportunities and Residency Cayman, or WORK, department one of its first initiatives. The new department will launch early in the coming year. It will enable the government to make 4 vital improvements on what has gone before. First, we are creating a new function within government to work with our key private sector employers to properly plan and meet the long-term labor market needs of our economy. Secondly, WORK will be able to support all Caymanians to access the labor market in a much more holistic way than has been the case with the National Workforce Development Agency, which it will replace. Thirdly, it will improve and streamline the work permit process so that it is fair and transparent for the benefit of businesses and employees alike. Finally, a new accreditation system will be launched that recognizes and rewards the many private sector employers who do play their part in employing and developing Caymanians. But, Mr. Speaker, unfortunately, not all employers play their part, and we do know cases where Caymanians have not been given a fair chance for employment in fields where they are qualified or skilled. And so, as I advised this House earlier this year, we are working at introducing a Fair Employment Opportunities Commission. This commission will fill a void that exists and will provide Caymanians with a place to go to complain and, more importantly, get action should they believe they have been treated unfairly in the job market, including when passed over unfairly for promotion or not given an opportunity for employment. The Fair Employment Opportunities Bill is still with legislative drafting and did not make this meeting of the House, Mr. Speaker, but I am pressing for it to come later this year. In the long term, the successful functioning of our labor market to benefit Caymanians is only possible if the Caymanians entering the market have the capabilities employers need. To ensure that happens, the government must address the need to radically improve standards of public education. The Minister of Education will speak in some detail on her plans during this meeting. but I am excited by the potential for improvement she has identified, and she has the full support of myself and her colleagues across government to forge ahead to deliver the changes we need. Here again, we are fortunate to benefit from the work done in the last administration. The baseline assessments of public schools indicated the size and scale of the challenges we face, but they also highlighted for us the key areas in which we needed to act. The Education Law 2016 gave a complete overhaul to the education system, and in so doing, created the substantive framework necessary for improvement. The Minister for Education is now driving that improvement forwards. The current budget is investing in additional teachers and in classroom support. More is being done for students with special needs. Plans for John Gray will create the learning environment our high school students deserve, and the pragmatic, phased approach the government is taking to the project is sensible and will avoid excessive costs. Mr. Speaker, we are already seeing improvements in education results. The follow-on inspections of our 10 public primary schools found that, quote, there has been an improvement in the quality of teaching, unquote, since the baseline inspections were completed. 8 out of 10 primary schools were graded satisfactory or good in the follow-on inspections, and results in Year 6 showed significant improvement in results for both mathematics and writing. Mr. Speaker, these improvements are encouraging. The principals and teaching staff in our schools deserve our thanks, and the students deserve our congratulations for their achievements. Our ambition must be to drive forward. With the support of the Education Council and that of the Counselor in Education, the member from Georgetown South, which the Minister, with the support of the Education Council, which the Minister has re-energized, the stage is now set for further improvement on that foundation. All our schools should be graded good or better, and our exam results should be at a level that compares with the best internationally. We must not settle for anything less. Only then can we be confident that young Caymanians are leaving school equipped for the competitive labor market they will face. To achieve that ambition, we need to see further improvements in the quality of teaching. Last month, the Minister announced that the government will be raising salaries over the next 2 years to recognize the hard work that teachers do and to boost our ability to attract and retain the best teachers, including Caymanian teachers. Our ongoing investment in the continuing professional development of our teachers will help support the brightest recruits to become the best educators. Support for academic achievement must be matched by other pathways into work through technical and vocational education and training. The hospitality school started during the last administration is now paying real dividends. We need more success stories like this. The government has begun a far-reaching review of the variety of programs that are already in place, and we will work with employers on the results of that review to enhance the opportunities for young Caymanians in terms of internships, apprenticeships, and other forms of work experience. It is also a key component of this government's approach that we need to ensure that growth is geographically rebalanced. Job opportunities will continue to be created in and around Georgetown and 7 Mile Beach, but we can do more to spread growth elsewhere to benefit other districts and their communities. With strong government support, the continued growth of Health City is creating more and more jobs, both directly and indirectly, in the eastern districts. The Tech Cayman initiative, which I mentioned earlier, may in time mirror the success of Health City and bring digital economy jobs to the eastern districts. The Mandarin Oriental Hotel recently announced for Bordentown will potentially act as the beginning of a renaissance in tourism in our former capital. The hotel will create hundreds of jobs in its own right, but it will also provide a catalyst for local business opportunities and provide the anchor for other tourism developments in Bordentown. Nor have we forgotten the sister islands. The expansion of Charles Colonel International Airport has enabled increases in airlift here to the Brac and on to Little Cayman, which has boosted tourism numbers by 12% over the last 2 years. Mr. Speaker, the second issue I raised in qualifying our ambition for economic growth was that the level of growth we achieve must be sustainable. The most obvious concern here relates to the impact of growth on our precious environment. This must always be a crucial component of the government's approach to the economy, and so it is with this government. I have mentioned just now that our support for the cruise berthing facility is conditional, not just on finding a suitable funding model, but also on a design that minimizes the environmental impact. The government is also taking steps not just to safeguard existing beach access and public open space, but to enhance it. The work that the Education and Financial Services Counselor and MLA for Georgetown South is doing in her community on plans for Smith-Barcadere is a standout example of what we can do to create a local environment which we can all enjoy and from which we can all benefit. And a little further east, the South Sound Boardwalk, which I have personally championed for more than a decade and which is now almost complete, will soon provide a safer space for those who walk or run alongside that section of South Sound and further enhance one of the most beautiful aspects in Grand Cayman. And just as important, Mr. Speaker, it will also preserve for years to come the gorgeous vistas along that section of coastline for the enjoyment of all. Vistas are important, Mr. Speaker, but Caymanians also cherish access to the water and our beaches, which is why, Mr. Speaker, my government brought a motion earlier this year to utilize $10 million from the Environmental Protection Fund to purchase land for public use, particularly beachfront properties and beach access pathways. These will forever be available for use by generations of Caymanians, residents, and visitors. I want to thank all members of this House once again, Mr. Speaker, for supporting the government motion and unanimously adopting the motion. More broadly, we need to protect our environment and secure long-term energy security through a shift away from these islands' almost complete reliance on fossil fuels. The national energy policy adopted by the last administration sets out an ambitious blueprint for Cayman's future. Work is now underway to implement that plan, beginning with a number of initiatives that will promote energy efficiency and energy saving by households and businesses and kickstart our transition to a lower carbon economy. It will not happen overnight, Mr. Speaker. Indeed, it cannot happen overnight, but progress is being made. We must also think about the kind of growth we want to attract to Cayman. That is why I have highlighted growth in the digital economy that can be achieved without the need for significant land take. Sustainable economic development also requires that infrastructure keeps pace with growth. The most obvious aspect of that is road infrastructure. Any journey around Grand Cayman in recent months might be characterized as a tour of various roadworks. That has brought some short-term pain, without a doubt, Mr. Speaker, but it has been a necessary part of our efforts to catch up on the backlog and to create the transport network this country needs. The successful completion of Phase 1 of the Linford-Pearson Highway Improvement Project last month by the NRA is just the latest example of the benefits our investment is bringing to these islands. And Mr. Speaker, I want to thank the chairman and the board and the hard-working people at the National Roads Authority for the good work that they have done and are continuing to do. Improved roads and pedestrian areas are a key feature of the Georgetown Revitalization Project that was started under the last administration. The Minister and the Ministry of Commerce, Planning and Infrastructure continues to develop the revitalization plan and is in the final phase of hiring a town manager to oversee the plan's implementation. The town manager will work directly under the ministry and will begin by supervising some of the smaller but important projects identified within the plan, the low-hanging fruit that should immediately give the town center a freshened and friendlier feel. Simultaneously, stakeholders, including businesses and residents, will be invited to contribute to the broader development of medium and longer-term plans to improve our town center and beyond. Mr. Speaker, another key part of the Georgetown Revitalization Project is to maintain the main functions of government within the capital. This government will resist any approaches or suggestions to move functioning government entities outside of the capital. For about 150 years, Georgetown has been the center of government, and it has been inside the government buildings within the core of the capital that historic decisions that have guided our country's development have occurred, including, Mr. Speaker, the events surrounding the creation of our coat of arms and our first constitution, events that we are celebrating this year and next. So, Mr. Speaker, I am therefore pleased to announce that government has last week completed the purchase of the Scotiabank building and its satellite car parks. These will support a larger project to provide 21st century court facilities for these islands, and in so doing, delivering on another of this government's stated objectives. Plans including erecting a new multi-story courts building connecting the Scotiabank building and the existing courthouse, which will also be suitably refurbished. The first phase of this project will commence early next year. When complete, this project will resolve the long-standing need for modern court facilities that will also serve as a significant landmark for generations to come. I am pleased to say that the Chief Justice and his staff are as excited as the government by this development, and we are all committed to ensuring that the end result is not only fit for purpose, but also affordable. As the plans develop, we will certainly keep this Honourable House and the public advised. Mr. Speaker, other physical infrastructure needs must also be met. One of the most pressing has been the need for a modern and effective solid waste infrastructure for all three islands. Negotiations with the Dart-led consortium to create the infrastructure are continuing as we seek to reach an agreed position on a number of reserved matters, including financial, technical, and legal issues. Once these have been agreed, a draft contract will be drawn up for central tenders committed to review and hopefully approve. The technical staff has advised that it anticipates this occurring by the end of March next year. The work being done on the environmental impact assessment is also expected to be completed by March, and shortly thereafter, all going well, we expect to have planning approval for the built waste facilities that are at the core of the project. There is a lot going on with this very technical project, and I'm grateful for the hard work going on in the Ministry of Health to ensure that we do not get blown off track and will actually see the work on the new waste management project begin in 2019. It has been a long time coming, but we are getting there, Mr. Speaker. And when completed, we will have a modern, fully integrated waste management facility that will end our reliance on the existing landfills. The ability to use waste as a resource for recycling and energy generation instead of a problem to be dumped transforms our approach to waste management and brings considerable health and other environmental benefits. And I want, Mr. Speaker, to acknowledge the efforts of the Minister for Health as he strives to deal with what is and has been one of the greatest challenges of any minister in many governments, to try to deliver a modern waste management facility. Mr. Speaker, sustainability also has an important social dimension. Our economic success must drive social improvement and not be used to mask inequity. The single most important issue in my mind, Mr. Speaker, is how we protect the most vulnerable in our community. The preference should always be, wherever possible, to ensure that people have the means to look after themselves. That is why the budget passed by this administration provided for what is, in effect, a minimum income guarantee for those in receipt of what we call poor relief payments. Our seamen and veterans and long-standing civil service pensioners. This minimum income guarantee was set for this year at $650 a month, rising to $750 a month next January. Under this government, as of January 2019, these welfare payments will have increased by 36% since we took office. Mr. Speaker, the government provides other support for these individuals in meeting their medical costs and providing other forms of social assistance. Part of the unfinished business from the last administration is to modernize the government's approach to welfare so that those Caymanians who need it can receive the right help at the right time. Here I must give my personal thanks to my councillor, the MLA for Prospect, who is working on my behalf with the new leadership of the Community Affairs Ministry, first to reform the hodgepodge of legislation that covers welfare, and then to ensure that the supporting processes in the Needs Assessment Unit and elsewhere in government are efficient and fit for purpose. In addition to supporting individuals in need, we also recognize the value of assisting Caymanians looking to purchase their first home to do so. And so we are continuing the work started last term to build homes that can be afforded by middle-income Caymanians. There are some 16 new affordable homes now being built in Bordentown and approaching completion that will be sold at between $110,000 and $125,000. I thank the Minister and the Councillor for the Environment and Housing and MLA from West Bay Central for their continued work in this area. Mr. Speaker, I also thank the Chairman of the Housing Trust, Mr. Tony Powell, and his able board for the work they did and are continuing to do to make this happen. I wish to highlight, Mr. Speaker, two specific groups that I believe have been let down by successive governments, but who can now look to this administration for effective support. The first of those are people suffering from mental illness. For years, we have required those patients to be sent off island for treatment at huge cost to the government and at a huge inconvenience to them and their families. My last administration committed to a long-term residential facility here in Cayman for those with mental illnesses. I thank the Minister for Health, Environment, Culture and Housing for his efforts to bring that project to fruition. And we can look forward to the contract to build this much-needed facility to be awarded next month and for the facility to be open in early 2020. The second group I want to highlight is children and young people at risk. Like many communities, we in Cayman have for far too long allowed the suffering of vulnerable children and young people to remain hidden, often hidden in plain sight. This government, Mr. Speaker, will tolerate that no more. As a government, we must put our own house in order and protect young people in our care. That is why we are prioritizing improvements to the Northwood residential facility to allow the proper separation of adults from children with special needs. More broadly, the Ministry is reviewing the effectiveness of the Department of Children and Families and working to achieve the full potential of the multi-agency safeguarding hub in partnership with the Royal Cayman Islands Police Service, which I am pleased to say has recognized the need to prioritize their work on safeguarding children and combating domestic violence. This is one facet of the much closer relationship between government and the police that has been engendered since the current commissioner came into post. We all recall how out of touch many felt that the Royal Cayman Islands Police Service had become from the communities it serves, and how remote the former leadership was from those of us who are elected to represent those communities. The new partnership we have created is built on the willingness of the current commissioner to work with elected government and respond to the voices from our communities. Thus, we have seen a welcome return to more visible community policing, ably led by Inspector Courtney Miles, made possible by the extra resources the government provided for the current budget. Discussions to supplement the additional police beat officers on our streets with community safety officers, similar to the community warden service we campaigned on, are now at an advanced stage, and I look forward to seeing the first recruits going into action next year. The Commissioner is finalizing his plans for community safety officers and will make a formal announcement in time. I will take this opportunity to again thank him and his team for their hard work and for creating an atmosphere of partnership with the elected government. And the extent of their work, Mr. Speaker, goes beyond community policing, and their broader work in fighting violent crime is also greatly appreciated. Over the past year, gang-related crime has been disrupted with arrest and imprisonment of some 10 high-profile offenders. In addition to the 18 guns turned in during the amnesty earlier this year, the RCIPS took a further 9 guns off the streets this year for a total of 27 illegal guns. Last year, some 29 illegal guns were removed. Mr. Speaker, the Joint Task Force of Customs, Immigration and Police that was formed this year has brought about 50 arrests, interdicted 750 pounds of ganja, and seized over $240,000 in illicit cash. They're also focusing on illegal gambling that often serves to fund other serious criminal ventures. Mr. Speaker, this government committed to creating safer communities and cutting serious crime, including gang and gun-related crimes, and we are providing the RCIPS with the resources needed to accomplish this. In turn, the Commissioner and his team are putting those resources to good use in acting to reduce crime in our islands. The government also committed to dramatically improving border security. Last week, the public was able to get a glimpse of the work that has been ongoing behind the scenes to create a Cayman Islands Coast Guard with the appointment of Commander Robert Scotland and Lieutenant Commander Leo Anglin, as well as the appointment of Mr. Charles Clifford as the Director of the new Customs and Border Control Agency. I again congratulate all three on their appointments, and on behalf of the government, I wish them success in the vital work they will be undertaking in their new roles. Both of these two entities will work to make our islands safer, stem the flow of drugs, guns, and illegal immigrants into our islands, and at the same time, smooth access to Cayman for legitimate travel. Mr. Speaker, it has been a short 15 months since the current government was sworn in, but we are delivering on our commitments and our ambitions for Caymanians. However, it is the achievement of this government's ambitions for the economy that is enabling us to deliver by generating the income to support necessary government spending. We are not, however, falling into the trap of simply spending whatever revenues come our way. Rather, we are taking the same measured approach that was the hallmark of the last government. Yes, Mr. Speaker, we are ambitious for our people, but part of that ambition is to be able to meet the current needs of these islands without creating a burden for future generations. We moved into full compliance with the prudent ratios set out under the Public Management and Finance Law towards the end of the last administration. But we have not loosened our grip on public finances. Whilst we have maintained our pledge not to raise fees and charges, government revenues, fueled by our economic success, continue to rise. We are continuing to bear down on costs wherever possible. As a result, for the first 6 months of 2018, the entire government's surplus topped $200 million. We continue to set aside money to build our reserves, and the surplus is also funding our capital projects that are on the way. We also continue to pay down government debt, and in fact have repaid almost $20 million over the course of this year alone. We will make a significant further step in that direction next year when we repay at least half of the bullet bond that falls due. The surpluses we achieve will also help cushion these islands should natural disaster or economic downturn threaten. I would like to thank the Minister of Finance and Economic Development for steering the public finances so skillfully. Mr. Speaker, it is because of our able management of public finances, coupled with a strong and vibrant economy, that has encouraged increasing investments across our country. This growth can be seen in the increased diversification of the economy, as well as gains in financial services, tourism, and development sectors. In fact, from the 1st of January to the 30th of August this year, the Planning Department has approved almost 670 projects valued at over $749 million. Mr. Speaker, this government, and certainly I as Premier, recognize that we have not achieved what we have done alone. But this government, like the previous one that I led, has been ably assisted by a good cadre of civil servants across all core government. And so, Mr. Speaker, I am pleased to advise today that the government has decided to provide a 5% cost of living increase to the civil service this year, backdated to the 1st of July, and which will commence being paid with the September salary. Providing government financial performance and the economy remains strong, we will look again at a further COLA increase in 2020 to adjust for the Consumer Price Index between 2018 and 2020. This will finally begin to bring civil servant salaries back on track after 7 or more years of playing catch-up with an increasing cost of living. This will also complete the plans started during the last administration to bring civil servants' pay back in line, and will not only benefit families of civil servants, but is money that will be spent back into the local economy. Mr. Speaker, we are also reviewing the broader salary scales of the Royal Cayman Islands Police Service, the Fire Service, and employees of the Department of Environmental Health to ensure that we can attract and retain the staff we need. And I will advise on these matters at a later date once the review is completed. In summary, Mr. Speaker, this is a government whose ambition for our people is clear. We are working to support economic growth in our pillar industries while increasingly looking to diversify our economy. We are ensuring that growth brings prosperity for all Caymanians by fostering entrepreneurship and creating the conditions necessary for full employment. We are ensuring that young people can participate in work through improvements we are delivering in our education system. We are striking the balance between economic growth and environmental impact and investing in the infrastructure that we need as our economy continues to grow. Some infrastructure needs, such as the airport, cruise port, mental health facility, and a new courts building, have been needed for well over a decade. But those needs are finally being met by this government, building on the foundation set by the last administration. And Mr. Speaker, this administration, like the last one that I led, has thus far achieved all that we have done with no new debt and no new taxes. Mr. Speaker, this government recognizes and is responding to the needs of the vulnerable in our community. We are improving living standards and acting to enhance public services to meet the needs of individuals and groups who need our help. We are working with the police to tackle crime, enhance public safety, and to provide public reassurance. All this we are doing while delivering on our pledge not to increase fees and duties, achieving budget surpluses, and paying down government debt. Mr. Speaker, I thank my entire team, ministers and councillors, for their hard work and commitment. I also wish to thank the acting governor, acting deputy governor, attorney general, and the cabinet secretary for their work and support. In particular, I wish to acknowledge the stellar work that the acting governor has done since he was required, with no notice, to step in to assume that role in the absence of Anwar Chaudhry as governor. Personally, I welcome the focus on delivery that Governor Chaudhry had brought to the role and regret his untimely withdrawal. While the uncertainty created by the means and timing of his absence is at the very least unhelpful, it is a great comfort to me and my government that the acting governor and others have been able to carry on the business of government with such dignity and professionalism. The House will know that this matter is entirely outside the remit of the elected government, but I believe the House and the country hope that it will soon be resolved. To the civil servants who are charged with implementing our policies, programs, and projects, I thank you for your hard work and assistance in delivering the government's priorities. I also thank my small but dynamic team in the Office of the Premier that provides support to me and the Government Caucus. A particular personal thank you is due to our Bracker no less, Roy Tatum, who provides both able leadership to that team and unwavering support, invaluable advice, and true friendship to me. I am truly grateful. Mr. Speaker, I cannot close without thanking you for the able job you are doing as Speaker of the Legislative Assembly. I also thank the clerk and the other hard-working staff of the Legislative Assembly, without whom we could not do the work we do here. Mr. Speaker, this is a government delivering on the ambition we have set out. This is a government whose talent is drawn from across political lines and made up of all those whose interest lies in doing what is best for our country and our people. This is a government I am proud and privileged to lead. In closing, I will say again that working together as one, my ministers and councillors have achieved much over the last 15 months, and I am proud of all that we have done. In the next 2.5 years, we will achieve much more. I have no doubt. Indeed, Mr. Speaker, it is true. There is great strength in unity. The best for these islands is still to come. I thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Premier. This Honorable House will now suspend until 2:30.